when there is an ever-growing body of evidence that keeping a body at a weight lower than minimum healthy weight is having negative effects on both physical and mental health. And the question is, why would anyone want their dancers to do that? Just from the perspective of a director, why do you want dancers in your company that are not healthy, that are not happy, that cannot tap into their full range of emotions?
I'm Caitlin, a former professional ballerina turned dance educator and career mentor, and this is the Brainy Ballerina podcast. I am here for the aspiring professional ballerina who wants to learn what it really takes to build a smart and sustainable career in the dance industry. I'm peeling back the curtain of the professional dance world with open and honest conversations about the realities of becoming a professional dancer. Come along to gain the knowledge and inspiration you need to succeed in a dance career on your terms. Before we begin today's episode, I wanted to come on and provide a trigger warning that this episode does include discussion of eating disorders as well as restrictive eating and disordered eating habits. So if you find this topic triggering, we really encourage you to skip this episode and prioritize your mental health and well-being. If you are someone you know is struggling with an eating disorder, please seek support from a healthcare professional you trust. Thank you for listening, and please take care of yourself. Hello and welcome to the Brainy Ballerina podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Sloan, and I am joined today by Stephanie Potreck. Stephanie is a former dancer turned doctor and sports nutritionist and founder of AusDancersOverseas. I invited Stephanie to join me today to get her professional take on a recent interview written for The Independent by Charlotte Cripps, where she was interviewing the director of the Birmingham Royal Ballet, Carlos Acosta. And for anyone unfamiliar with the article, here is what Acosta said when he was asked if he had witnessed fat shaming among female dancers during his career. He said, "Weight is a very hard word because right now, if you say shape, but as a professional, you have to watch your weights. You have to watch your line. Women have always been carried in ballet. Obviously, sometimes the guy doing the lifting can't cope if the girl isn't light enough. No one wants anyone to become ill. Please, no one wants that. But dancers have to keep within a range so the partner can cope with the steps." And so Stephanie, as a medical professional who is working with dancers and seeing dancers who have been harmed by this belief, what were your initial thoughts when you read this article?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. What were my initial thoughts? I think within a split second, I was actually quite upset because we've been doing so much work over the past 5, 10, 15 years in order to get away from beliefs of dancers can only be within a certain weight issue, particularly here in Europe where I am at the moment. There was this magic number of 50 kilograms and no dancer. There were so many companies and schools like no dancer above 50 kilograms because otherwise, as Acosta said, the guys can't cope. And you only need a little bit of common sense in order to understand that that's probably not going to add up well. So I was actually really quite upset. I'm very, very grateful for the one who sent it to me because I hadn't seen it yet on that Sunday when it was published in The Independent. And someone sent it to me and I thought, can someone pinch me? I can't believe he said it. And that is because Acosta himself has been considered a very progressive mind. He might have undone it by now or with that interview, but he was considered a very progressive mind. And all of a sudden we go back to, ballerinas have to keep within a certain weight range, again, no matter the height. And otherwise the guys can't cope. And I would say probably so much all at once came up because I'm very much into weightlifting. I absolutely love it. I feel it so empowering physically and mentally. And when I go to the gym and say someone complained about not being able to lift 50 or 60 kilograms, everyone, even all females in the gym look at me like, you're kidding, right? Yeah, I think it really brought up a lot. And I would say it brought up a lot in a lot of people. Dancers, dance students, dance teachers, former dancers, dance parents. There's been so many people so upset about this interview. And interestingly, we've all been faced with silence so far. So I would say the discussions coming out of this initial outrage, they really deeply matter. However, that is pretty much one-sided at the moment because those involved in having spread this harm have stayed silent so far, and it's about 2 weeks now.
Yeah, and this is nothing new for those of us in the dance world, right? We've heard this many, many times, but why do you think this particular interview was extra triggering for a lot of people? Because I felt that personally, and I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Because the ballet world in particular, the dance world in general, but the ballet world in particular is so obsessed with weight. And, in preparation of this podcast, I was looking back to when actually did we hear for the first time about female dancers or female dance students are very often a very low weight that actually interferes with healthy and proper maturation. So they're not going through puberty the way they should. That was published in 1980, 44 years ago. Just think about it, 44 years ago. And it's so probably, I think data collection was 1978, 1979, right? So we've been knowing it ever since. And initially in this publication, it was a publication by Michelle Warren. I think she is still working somewhere in the New York area. She clearly said part of believing that they need to keep such a low weight is ballet in itself, but the other part is the training load and the training volume, particularly the training volume. And she could clearly show that if they can rest and if they can sort of restore energy balance, they can be healthy, and they don't even really, and that's the most interesting detail of this story, they don't even really put on weight. So she had a couple of injured dancers, I should say, so just to make that clear, she had a couple of injured dancers in this study. They needed to rest. They ate more. They did not put on weight, but they were healthier, happier, and stronger afterwards. So basically, they came back stronger. As we always say, like an injury is an opportunity to come back stronger. Yeah. So we've been knowing that for 44 years. And nevertheless, it is perpetuated. Warren's study was only the first one of many. It is still being perpetuated that a low weight is the responsibility of female dancers or female identifying dancers. In this case, it doesn't even make a difference. When there is an ever-growing body of evidence that keeping a body at a weight lower than minimum healthy weight is having negative effects on both physical and mental health. And the question is, why would anyone want their dancers to do that? Just from the perspective of a director, why do you want dancers in your company that are not healthy, that are not happy, that cannot tap into their full range of emotions? Because they can't if they are underfueled. That's the point. Why would you want them in your company? Just because you're, sorry for saying that, but you're unwilling, too lazy to set up a proper strength and conditioning program and good partnering classes where both learn partnering skills. I'm lost for words here because, I'm just lost.
I feel like part of it is you have dancers who are hungry and struggling and all these things, and then they're not going to question anything going on. They are going to be almost like robots in the sense that they don't have the energy to ask questions. Your hierarchy of needs is not being met. So you're not getting to this top peak. And for a director, maybe that is the ultimate goal, is to have dancing robots who don't question their leadership, who don't have autonomy, who just do what they're told silently. They're staying in their place. And it's almost like the broader issue of just how we treat dancers and how we almost want to infantilize them and keep them, like we call them girls, instead of women. It's like we want to keep them young, and like we don't want them to have this autonomy and thinking brain almost, because then they might start to realize other broader issues that are going on. For them, it's easier this way.
It is. And I'm very, very glad you're bringing this up. I mean, I've posted about this in the past, but it is really true. Why do we see incredibly talented dancer where we think like, oh my God, the way they are moving, that is so beautifully, but internally or mentally, they are still like teenager level, if at all. Sometimes it's more childlike actually. And that is because our motor skills, they develop before our, let's say, full range of emotional skills develop, right? So if you sort of have them halfway properly fueled until their motor skills have developed, you will have a beautiful dancer, but they're just going to be sort of a, there's a shell you're watching. You used the word robot, which I took it out of the newsletter last week, actually. But I often wonder, what are we actually watching as audiences? Like, are we watching robots? Because they can't really feel all the emotions they are meant to feel and they are meant to display on stage. And that is because the emotional part of the brain has been underfed for such a long time. And that's basic science.
Yeah, so let's talk about the science. You posted this really great Instagram post where you broke down, you kind of myth busted all the different things said in this article. In the article, he says you have to watch your weight, and you said this not only is this disappointing, but it's also wrong. And I would love for you to elaborate more. I know you did already speak on this a little bit, but I would love to hear even more of your thoughts on why is this so wrong from a medical standpoint.
Because if you only focus on the weight, you place the responsibility only on one part of partnering duo, and that can't be correct. But even more so, we have science. There's in particular, there's one study which is called Risk Factors for Lower Back Injury in Male Dancers Performing Ballet Lifts. They looked into 2 lifts here, and the interesting thing here is that actually the moment where male dancers are at most risk of back injury is before the ballerina has even left the ground. If you now want to tell someone that before she has left the ground, that has something to do with her weight, then I have to say, can we make that make sense, right? So this publication has found, and that is the let's say clinical or practical experience of many male dancers as well. So I've had a lot of responses from male dancers saying, well, actually, it's not so much about the weight. It is so much more about what happens on stage or what happens during rehearsal. And is she like really in the position where she needs to be? Or did I not manage to get into the position right before the lift where I needed to be? So do we have a couple of centimeters more or less distance? And that is what is going to affect the lift. And that is what ultimately could cause the injuries. I also had, interestingly, lots of male dancers saying they would always prefer a stronger ballerina because they can support the lift. And here we are again. It is a shared responsibility, right? And we know from underfueled, underweight, maybe underweight, not everyone underfueled is also underweight, but let's say from very, very light ballerinas with very restrictive diets, we know that they actually do not have the muscular strength and power to support themselves the way it would be favorable for good partnering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is because when someone restricts their diet so much, the body goes, wow, that looks like starvation, or it's say at least something like that could potentially be life-threatening. And then it breaks down muscles. And that is completely makes sense if you know that 1 gram of muscle stores about 4 calories, whereas 1 gram of body fat stores about 9 calories. So in order, as our body does not know when this sort of, let's say, extraordinary situation is going to end, it's going to do what's going to keep it alive for the longest. So that means, of course, if it stores the body fat that gives more energy long term than storing muscle and giving away the body fat. That is a super smart decision. That's how our bodies have, over hundreds and thousands of years, kept us alive. That's why we are talking here today, right? But that is what is happening in any ballerina as well. She may look a little bit more toned than others, but that doesn't mean she is stronger. That is only because she has genuinely lower weight. We know very much about a shift in body composition when someone is quite underfueled. So the body really clings on to body fat and breaks down muscle or muscular tissue, because it could be like your biceps, your quadriceps, your glutes, whatever. But it could also be internally, like muscles that usually move your food through your guts. So it could be both. Yes, so they can't be so strong as they could be if they were well fueled. So they are not going to be particularly helpful in partnering.
Right. I also want to talk about what you said about, he said you have to watch your line. And you said, lines are not created by weights. They're created by being healthy, strong, and mentally in a healthy place. Can you talk more about that?
It is coming back to what we said before. So if you create a line, you need to be strong. So if you're not strong, your line is never going to look the same as anytime you're strong. I know that lots of dance students and young dancers get upset every single year because who gets the most significant role or who's cast for the most significant role, that is very often the one being the skinniest, knowing they very often have difficulties like getting through their variations, whether that's muscular strength or endurance or both. And they very often also complain about like, oh, there's a lack of artistry. It's like a robot. Yeah, that's exactly for these reasons, because they are not as strong as they should be or could be if they were really healthy. They can tap into the emotions like someone who's healthy weight, even if that's minimum healthy weight, and who has a brain that is fully developed.
Right.
You mentioned it before. The thing
Yeah.
is, this restriction isolates quite a lot, because anyone who's been told like you have to lose weight or you have to watch your line or you have to watch, whatever, they are very busy berating themselves. And of course other bodies trying to say like, you need more for what we are doing every single day, you need more. And then it immediately like goes against them. Oh my god, I don't have willpower. Oh my god, I'm such a bad person. Oh my god, I'm so greedy. All these thoughts, and they keep you, or they prevent you to see what's really going on around you, and they also prevent you from connecting with others. And that is, of course, very helpful in companies where you just want to rule.
Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting. The first time that I was told that I needed to lose weight so that a man could lift me, I was 14 years old. I had been cast as Clara in The Nutcracker. It was my first big role, and we didn't have men at my studio or boys when I was that age training with us at that time. And so we always brought in guest artists from professional companies to partner. In our production, there was no Snow King and Snow Queen. So Clara and the Prince had a pretty hefty pas de deux. And it was hard. I mean, there was press lifts, there was jumping shoulder sits. Like there was some, more advanced partnering steps. And it was my first experience partnering. I didn't know what I was doing. We had a partner come in, and he had been in the year before. He was a dancer with, I think, ABT at the time, and he had come in to do Sleeping Beauty with us, and he did Bluebird and was wonderful. And in this time period, a year later of him coming in against Do Nutcracker, he had transitioned to dancing with Ballet Trocadero. And so now he had started doing female roles and wasn't doing the male roles anymore. So he hadn't been lifting women and focusing on that part of the career. And so he came in for the very first rehearsal, and we had limited rehearsal. Like the guest stars would come in like 2 weekends and then for the show, right? So he came in for the first rehearsal, and it didn't go well. And I wasn't an experienced partner. Like you said, I did not know how to hold myself, when to jump, the timing of everything. And so, yeah, we had the first rehearsal. It did not go well. In my mind, I'm just kind of frustrated because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have very limited time. I'm getting nervous. And then I got called into the office and was told, he's having a hard time lifting you, and it'd be great if you could lose a little bit of weight.
Oh my god.
I remember this experience so vividly because this happened, and I'm crushed. I'm absolutely crushed. I'm like, wow, and I walk out of the office and I see one of the other dancers, and she's an older dancer in the company. She might have been a senior in high school at that time. And she looked at me, and she could just like see it in my eyes that something had happened. And she goes, "Did you just get a fat talk?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, welcome to the company." And that actually saved me, because her saying, "This is just the culture. We've all been there. We've all gotten it. It's fine. It's not a you problem. It's a culture problem." And for me, that was like, okay, like I didn't go down into a dark place. I didn't go into really restrictive habits. I didn't really listen to this. I just said, I'm just going to keep being a 14-year-old girl and doing that. And that was like my saving grace, was knowing that it was a culture problem and not like a me problem. And obviously this culture needs to change, but also just like talking about it and saying like, it's not you.
Mm-hmm.
It's this bigger picture at large was like so helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
That was far from the last time that I heard that, but it was the first time. And it was so interesting to me. I didn't know at the time, I was too young, but to like look back and be like, this is being put on the girl's shoulders. Why was that? Instead of saying to this professional male dancer who is getting paid a good amount of money to come be in the show, hey, you should have been working on this before you came here. Like if you hadn't been lifting people, you should have known what you were getting into. They have the video of the pa, right? And I don't know what was said to him. Maybe there was a conversation, I don't know. And it was, but on my end, all I heard was, it's not on him to be stronger. It's on you to be skinnier.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I think so many can relate to this because the situation seems to be more or less the same most of the time. What I found so interesting now listening to you is you've had a sense you didn't have sufficient skills for partnering. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is what both genders really feel a lot. They don't have sufficient skills. Of course, I had a lot of messages from female dancers, but I found it so interesting to have a lot of messages from male dancers as well. And so many have said, we felt terrible. We felt terrible for us. We felt terrible for the girl. We felt weak, but no one ever guided us what to do in order to get better. The partnering skills in general or strength. And I mean, you need both anyway. Yeah, you need both. And so some of them found themselves in the gym not knowing what they were doing, and probably it wasn't then particularly helpful. This is how it's been done, I would say, until recently, and probably it just continues while we are talking. So many companies, when someone signs a contract with them, are like, look, we have a discounted membership at Studio XYZ. Just go and do some training. It's like, yeah, why not check whether they've actually ever learned what they need to do? So yes, we absolutely don't know what happened to the professional dancer who was meant to dance with you, but it is just in general really a huge problem. Yeah, the responsibility is just, should I say, placed upon the girl's shoulders or the female dancer's shoulders, It absolutely is, and that is not a solution, but it is something that reflects society at large. If someone applies for any sort of job position, I've seen this in academics quite a lot. If they don't look like the next best model, they're not going to cut it. And so much. I've once had a boss who was talking so much about like, oh, I can't believe she figured this out because of the way she looks. What's this to do with, nothing? Nothing. She was just a brilliant researcher.
Mm-hmm. And I often feel like, and not always, but I often feel like in the ballet world, we're holding women to a different standard than men because there are so many more women. If you can't cut it, if you can't be this weight, if you won't do the X, Y, and Z, we'll find someone else. But when it comes to men, they don't feel as replaceable. There's less of them. And so they're willing to say, we'll have this conversation with the women, but there's not that responsibility always placed on the men. And I agree that it's both parties' responsibility to be strong and to have the skills. And I also have found in my experience that I have been told multiple times that I needed to lose weight, but I was never connected with a medical professional or connected with a strength trainer or anything of these lines to assess where I was health-wise and to help me develop a program to be the best dancer I could be. It was very just one-sided of this is the thing that you need to do, and that will change everything. If you could just lose this, then that would be great. And that's what's so frustrating.
Mm-hmm. It is so frustrating, and it is unfortunately something, I don't know. I think that a ballet teacher knows everything has been passed down to us. I was shocked to see how young some of those teachers commenting were saying, but it is for me to decide or to advise them on their health. And it's like, no, it's not, because, me as a doctor or as a nutritionist, I do not teach them dance steps, and you wouldn't want me to teach them dance steps. So it is not for you to decide on whether or not they need to lose weight. And I mean, it is not only that they don't have all the health data, because you don't as a teacher. You absolutely don't, and you don't need to. But also, you have not been trained to read them. And that's, by the way, something we say a lot when we talk about screenings. One of the studies I did with Nikki Key, where we developed a screening questionnaire for low energy availability in dancers. It is not for teachers to screen them. It is for a healthcare professional, either associated with the school, working on site, or just being the private physio or doctor or nutritionist working with this dancer. I do what I'm trained to do, you do what you are trained to do. But this sense of entitlement, they know everything, is gobsmacking. I don't even really know what to say, because what kind of attitude is inhuman.
Yeah, I agree. We're so obsessed with this marker of weight as the number one marker of someone's health. And even in the article, it said we want people to be healthy. But, so I'm curious, what are these? And obviously, like you said, we don't need to necessarily understand all the nuances of this, because this is for medical professionals to handle, and we need to be able to pass this off to people like you. But I'm curious, when you are working with dancers, What are some of the things you're screening for to help determine if they're healthy, if they are in a good place?
A lot. It's a lot, because there's so many things I need to ask. I was just thinking about, do I even know how many pages the initial questionnaire has? I'm afraid I have not, but it's a lot. So I asked about so many things. I asked about their previous medical history, their previous nutritional history, the questionnaire that we developed for screening, plus a lot more. It's going to be a work in progress forever because we have more scientific results. So we want to add more to the questionnaire. That's just the way it goes. Yeah, so I asked about previous medical history. I asked about previous nutritional history. I asked about their goals. I asked about their beliefs. I asked about whether they've been told to lose weight at any point in their career. I asked whether they are actually trying to diet right now, and if so, what they've been trying in order to lose weight. And I even asked, I mean, it's quite straightforward, but I even asked what weight they think they dance at best, because that is really so interesting. I asked about current height and lowest and highest weight for current height, because that gives me a good idea about yo-yo dieting, because that is also not particularly good for the body. And then I asked, what do you think, what weight would you be dancing at best? And for me, and I find that so revealing, most of the time it is their highest weight for current height or higher. There's lots of very smart dancers out there having a good idea that trying to be such a low weight as they're trying at that moment is not really good for them. Coming back to what we said about when we go into one of these extraordinary situations where we restrict and our body goes like, oh my God, that could potentially be life-threatening, it stores more body fat and breaks down more muscle for energy reasons, for very, very smart energy reasons, right? That is the one aspect of this mechanism, of this, let's call it survival mechanism, because it is one. But on the other hand, if you have 1 kilogram of body fat and 1 kilogram of body muscle, the body fat has a whole lot more volume. So you have twice 1 kilogram, but one looks much bigger than the other. So what do you want? You want the dancer looking lean and having beautiful lines, to use Acosta speak, but you want them to be muscular, because that's where the power sits in order to live up to the profession. That's also what I think a lot of guys were mentioning, saying, I need my female partner to be strong because then she can help me with the lift. What I also always say is, when you think of weightlifting, yes, of course, you can lift like 100 kilograms over your head with a barbell, but the thing is, the barbell is not going to help you. So every now and then, I'd like to have my barbell helping me doing a lift, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, doing an assembly and a jump into the lift or something.
There we go. It is really just using a little bit of common sense and saying we can continue to have this discussion the way it's been in the interview. The obsession with certain numbers. I guess we've got to go back to 1920s Russia, because that was when the, should I say, famous or infamous height weight chart, the Vaganova height weight chart, came up. People totally forget that humans have developed ever since. It's more than 100 years ago. It's more than a century ago. And we are now taller than ever, and our build is different to 100 years ago. So applying something which was questionable at that time already to the present. We have directors still in Europe applying this Vaganova height and weight chart, and they are getting away with it until this day. I hope not for much longer. Let's just imagine they get seriously sick or like a very serious illness. Let's just say it's going to be cancer. So life-threatening. But underfueling can also be life-threatening. This is why I'm using cancer as an example. Is any one of them going to say, oh, I'm going to be fine with what was done in cancer treatment in the 1920s? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, but we expect our female dancers to be okay with what was used as standard in the 1920s. Like, come on, we've moved past that, haven't we?
I mean, we should.
We should.
But have we? I don't know.
I don't know either.
What are the lifelong implications of this for dancers? Because the fact is, for most of us, our careers are very short, much shorter than the average person's career. We're not retiring typically at 65. So we're having this career, and then we have our whole life to live.
Right.
So what are these lifelong implications that are happening to dancers because of this issue?
There are quite many, but let's start with the most obvious one, and that is brittle bones, or bones that are not as dense as they should be. And that is usually associated with trying to restrict from an early age on. I mean, I have dancers They got a little booklet with, calorie counts for like all sorts of foods at the age of 8. Like, that's as inappropriate as it can get.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So they try to delay puberty as much as possible. I mean, many do, because apparently the prepubescent body is more of an ideal body in ballet. Talking about ballet here mostly. Trying to maintain a prepubescent body always goes with trying to suppress reproductive hormones, because obviously reproductive hormones are what drives puberty. In both, in males and females, reproductive hormones are closely linked with bone health. And if you are suppressing your reproductive hormones, your bone density is not going to be as high as it could be and should be. It is not unusual for me to see dancers at the age of 18, 19, 20 having restricted their diet already for 4, 5, 6 years, and they actually show signs of osteopenia, which we would normally think shows up between the ages of 55 and, or 55 plus. While it is possible to regain some bone density, we can't promise that you will achieve the levels you would have had if you had fueled better, and or if you had not been on a restrictive diet. So some may actually be at risk of fractures and complications in terms of fracture healing for the rest of their lives. So that's definitely the most obvious one. But we really have a lot of other problems as well, because our reproductive hormones, they play so many roles. Everyone goes always like, oh, isn't that great that then you don't have a menstrual cycle? And that's totally fine. I mean, it's like, it's not very convenient once a month anyway. So the flexibility of our blood vessels is actually dependent on estrogen. So you would want to have it, because if you're not having it, your cardiovascular system needs to work so much harder, and you find dancing so much harder than it needs to be, because they are stiffer. The blood vessels are stiffer than they need to be. So why would we do that to ourselves? We do it to ourselves, or we've done it to ourselves, or a lot of dancers are still doing it to themselves. But why would you do it? Wouldn't you want to be your cardiovascular system to be like spot on, like the best it can be? There's our skin with estrogen receptors. There's our brain with estrogen receptors. And now coming back to, can they actually tap into the full range of emotions? No, they can't, because estrogen is part of what makes you happy in your brain. We would want to have them. So these are some of the effects, but there's also other things that, for example, have an influence on performance, like our motor skills are not, or our motor balance, or the control of our motor center is not as good as it could be. Our endurance is not as good. Our muscular output, like strength and power, is not as good as it could be. In a performing art, like, how can we even talk about this? That we absolutely neglect muscular strength, endurance, power. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. We don't know exactly. Probably it is, it is a two-way situation. We may have psychological issues first and then underfueling, but we may also have underfueling first and then arising psychological issues. The dance world is a very relentless environment anyway, and there's no need to contribute to that. And I think, speaking about mental health, yes, there is more awareness, but also we don't need to foster even higher numbers. That's not necessary. There may be more diagnoses around anyway, because, as I said, more awareness also in the general population. But why foster that? Why contribute to more disordered eating or to more eating disorders? And just to emphasize that, because I think that's really not clear for very many people, eating disorders, and particularly anorexia, which is so typically associated with ballet, because we have the highest numbers of anorexia in ballet dancers, is worldwide the mental health condition or mental illness with the highest mortality rate. In the US, it is ever so slightly different, because we have the opioid crisis there. So numbers are higher. But if you look at numbers worldwide, anorexia has the highest mortality rate of all mental health conditions, higher than depression.
Wow.
I don't know, like, my stomach is turning talking about this, because I think, like, how can humans do that to others? And particularly, how can they do that to minors?
Mm-hmm.
That's an ethical question now, of course. So, you see, there are so many layers to this topic. Yeah, we need to have very nuanced discussions.
Yeah, and like you said, this it's not hyperbole to say it's a life-threatening issue that we're experiencing for dancers, and that's the thing that I just can't get past. Is you wanting to have a dancer who looks a certain way in a tutu on stage more important than their life? How can you say that? If you're willing to say these things to dancers, this is the cause and effect. You're seeing it directly in your clinic.
Mm-hmm.
It's heartbreaking, and it's interesting. I asked you to come talk about this because I realized I hadn't said anything about it because I just was like in a state of freeze.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go into fight mode when I saw this article or anything. I went into a freeze where I was just like, I don't know what to do. I had such a like intense reaction to it in my body because of all my experiences and just wanting to not, like, just wanting to be like, I can't deal with this. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I have to, because I don't want dancers to feel the same way I feel. And I know us talking about it makes a difference, even if it's hard. I'm just so grateful that you have taken the time. And I would love to end on maybe a positive note. I would love to hear from you. What is your ideal scenario? What would be your dream in a ballet company as far as having physios and that kind of thing on board? If we could design our perfect, quote unquote, perfect world of having dancers be truly healthy and at their maximum capacity, what would that look like?
The ideal world, that's pretty much close to what's happening down under, actually. So it's really interesting. I've been in contact with Sue Mays from the Australian Ballet the past couple of days. Yes, in an ideal world, you would have an artistic director who may still have his vision of how dances should look like, but instead of addressing the dancer, if there are any questions, they would go and see someone of the healthcare team and say, is there anything I need to be worried about? Or, in my opinion, is this body able to lose some weight, or and so on. And then you would have a discussion, artistic director, medical team. The outcome, yes, probably in most cases would be, no, this body is not able to lose any more weight. And I would then hope for the rest of the healthcare team to sort of jump on then and say, okay, we'll take it from here. And we see that we have an individualized strength and conditioning program. There's certainly still some potential hidden. And so how can we get them be stronger or be more flexible or be, whatever the issue is? Then an artistic director being okay with that and saying, okay, you are the expert on sort of medical, nutritional data, or any allied healthcare profession we need for the ideal dance company. Going back to the studio, being fine with it, and, moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a space where dancers could feel safe, where they could tap into their emotions, really wholly, fully tap into their emotions, display them on stage, where possibly audiences would also feel and see the difference, because there's more power, there's more being told on stage, there's more going on. That certainly would be ideal. And talking about the Australian Ballet, I mean, the inside scoop of what I've been messaged. I had someone say, it was a male dancer as well, like, when I think of Swan Lake, my partner is always so tired because the ladies have to do so much, and, we can rest for 2 acts. And, yeah. And then seeing, like, from World Ballet Day last year, that actually the Australian Ballet was like, oh, our male dancers have quite some rest while the Swans are busy rehearsing in the studio. So let's create a really good program for them so that their partnering skills are going to improve. And it's about improving. It's not shaming anyone or blaming anyone. It's about improving. Like, how can we as a company, how can we get better? And I think I should end on that one. It is a company as a whole and not someone at the top whose views dominate everything and anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would be amazing. I'm always so amazed by seeing, like you said, what's going on at the Australian Ballet. They've been doing this for quite some time now, and it is interesting to see how slow it is to pick up in the rest of the world, because they've proven that this is a good system. Like, they have what appears to be happier, healthier dancers with less injuries, who have autonomy, who feel valued in their workplace. I've not spoken to people there, so I can't say that, but that is what it appears from the outside. And obviously, there's still gorgeous dancers who are putting on top-notch productions.
Mm-hmm.
Have we lost anything? No, we've gained so much. So
Mm-hmm.
I hope that having these conversations and everything that you're doing can help the progress continue, and seeing these examples in the world, and just knowing that it is possible to have it all, in the sense of you don't have to sacrifice dancers' well-being to put on a good show.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. And this constant talk about tradition,
Mm.
Yes, of course, we want to move or make ballet still relevant in the 21st century, but that does not mean that we are not allowed to rethink or reconsider whether what is a tradition is still good today, because lots of things that were good in the past or functional in the past are no longer today. And I mean, that's not really a problem. So then we change it.
Mm-hmm.
We know better today. So there's really no reason to say, yeah, because of tradition.
Yep.
Make tradition relevant in the 21st century. It's possible.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for this conversation. This has been really enlightening for me and hopefully for everyone listening. Your take on these issues and how outspoken you are for the dancers is just always very inspiring to me. And I always look to you as kind of my compass in these moments to see, okay, let me get some facts and some medical based information here, because in moments where I feel like I'm frozen with emotion, this is what helps me move forward. So thank you so much, Stephanie. And would you please share how people can see your work or get in touch with you if they want to learn more or see any of the posts that we've been referencing?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Caitlin. Yeah, I'm quite emotional talking about these topics because I see the harm being done, and this does not go unnoticed. I do feel it myself a lot. So how can you reach me? I am most active on Instagram, actually, as AusDancersOverseas. If you want to message me, shoot me a DM or an email at hello@AusDancersOverseas.com, or find me at www.AusDancersOverseas.com.
That's perfect. I'll put that all in the show notes too, so anyone can easily access that. And thank you again, Stephanie. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, Caitlin.
Thank you for tuning in to the Brainy Ballerina podcast. If you found this episode insightful, entertaining, or maybe a bit of both, I would so appreciate you taking a moment to leave a rating and hit subscribe. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll join our community of dancers passionate about building a smart and sustainable career in the dance industry. Plus, your ratings help others discover the show too. I'll be back with a new episode next week. In the meantime, be sure to follow along on Instagram at The Brainy Ballerina for your daily dose of dance career guidance.